I was trying to figure out why am I laying here. I didn't remember getting out of the vehicle. Maybe we're in a
Right.
gunfight. We
Right.
were not, thankfully. It's always nice. And yeah, I just sort of did a push up, got to my feet, was looking around. My medic was helping my gunner. I had full face and neck second degree burn, third degree burns on both my hands, full thickness third degree,
Mhm.
blood pouring out of my face. Um, yeah, it was one of those days where you wake up and have a bad year. And I spent the following 14 months at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas,
Right.
uh, going through burn treatment, reconstructive surgery, uh, head trauma stuff, mental health stuff, things like that.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stephenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where our mission is to empower you to live your best audacious life ever. It's always a pleasure to share this space with you. And if it's the first time here, I say welcome. And if you're a returning listener, I say welcome back and thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. Now, together, we're going to explore inspiring stories and actionable insights to help you embrace boldness and resilience in every aspect of your life. Now, imagine resilience as a sturdy lighthouse standing tall against relentless waves. Just as a lighthouse endures storms and guides ships safely to shore, resilience helps us navigate through trauma, allowing our inner light to guide us toward healing and growth. Brian Fleming is a former U.S. Army infantryman and a survivor of a suicide bombing in Afghanistan. After enduring extensive recovery and rehabilitation, Brian has dedicated his life to helping others overcome trauma and find strength in their stories. His journey from the battlefield to an inspiring speaker and author is a testament to resilience and hope. Brian's experiences and insights are particularly relevant as we delve into the importance of resilience. His story of surviving trauma and finding purpose in adversity offers value. So let's check out a conversation with Brian. Enjoy. Hey, Brian, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you making the time like this, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always great to connect with individuals, and for me, the best part of this is being able to share the different stories or experiences that people have, because it's through those stories or experiences, we can help others along the way on their own journey to live their best audacious life. And you certainly have a story, a remarkable one that you can that you're here to talk about it, and that's being a survivor after a suicide bombing. And now that you're here and you're sharing your story, again, being able to help others who are maybe going through trauma of some sort, to get them to understand, again, what this instance means in their lives, and that we're still here to go on and make differences down the road. So maybe as a starting point, I can get you to sort of elaborate further, just to give our audience an idea a little bit about who you are and what's gotten you to this point.
Yeah, I joined the United States Army right out of high school in 2003, and I went in as Army infantry. Eventually, got sent to Afghanistan. I was a team leader in an infantry platoon there in 2006.
Hmm.
While I was there, I was in two vehicles that were blown up and totally destroyed. First was a roadside bomb that blew up my vehicle, destroyed it about a month after we arrived. And then a few months later, I actually wasn't injured in that one, but then a few months later, I was in another vehicle. I was the truck commander in the lead vehicle of about a 15 vehicle convoy when a suicide bomber in a minivan got right up next to my door, slammed into it, and exploded. Blew himself and his van into billions of pieces. I woke up laying face down in a ditch on the side of the road in Kandahar. I had no idea, right there on Highway 1. I had no idea what happened. I didn't remember anything happening. Uh, my first thought was, why would I go to sleep here? I was trying to figure out why am I laying here. I didn't remember getting out of the vehicle. Maybe we're in a
Right.
gunfight. We
Right.
were not, thankfully. It's always nice. And yeah, I just sort of did a push up, got to my feet, was looking around. My medic was helping my gunner. I had full face and neck second degree burn, third degree burns on both my hands, full thickness third degree,
Mhm.
blood pouring out of my face. Um, yeah, it was one of those days where you wake up and have a bad year. And I spent the following 14 months at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas,
Right.
uh, going through burn treatment, reconstructive surgery, uh, head trauma stuff, mental health stuff, things like that.
Sure, sure. I mean, first off, congratulations to be here to be able to tell that story. That certainly is an impactful one, though. Question. I would imagine things were happening like super quick in that moment. Do you remember what that was like, and when you reflect on that situation?
Yeah, I was in the vehicle and everything was fine. It was normal. And then just in the blink of an eye, I just realized I was laying on the side of the road and I didn't know how I got there. And so, I mean, if I would have died, it would have been a peaceful death. I didn't know anything happened until I woke up. And so,
Mhm.
my wife says, the perfect way to die is for her and I to die like they do in the end of the movie, The Notebook. Both of them end up cuddled together, dying together. And I say, well, either that or just stand right next to a giant explosion because you'll never know what hit you.
Gotcha. No, I hear you.
That's just me.
No, no, I understand what you mean, and I'm actually appreciate the fact that you're able to find humor in that.
Yeah,
What was your
we all have, these coping mechanisms that
Sure.
we discover,
Yep.
and everyone's different.
Yep.
Everyone handles trauma different.
Yep.
I've just found that humor and sarcasm is a big one of mine. If I can make light of it, make a joke. I mean, I'm still here. I'm
Yes.
not joking about somebody else's bad experience. It's about my own,
Right.
and it's very healing, and it also encourages other people. I found out uh, to move forward and take their next step beyond whatever it is they're dealing with.
Understood. No, no, it makes total sense. It makes total sense. So you said you're hospitalized for about 14 months, sort of getting rehabilitating yourself and getting you back on your feet, so to speak. During that time, like, what was your mental state like? Did you fully still, like, I guess I'm assuming by at some point you came to terms with it, what was happening to you. Where were you at mentally?
Yeah, it was kind of two things. One, it was I was, pretty hyper vigilant sometimes. I didn't have the worst attitude, but I was very obviously on guard because that's
Mhm.
what you have to be in a war zone and you come home
Yep.
that way. But the flip side of it was just, well, I'm still here. I survived. I'm getting better and I'm gonna get out of the military and move on in life.
Right.
What's for lunch? Tacos? Great, let's go get tacos. I mean, there really wasn't uh uh I would say a huge battle mentally with myself,
Okay.
like some sort of moral injury or something that would really like hold me back. A lot of people do deal with that based on their specific situation. I ended up not. I'm I never had a problem talking about what happened. I'm the kind of person I don't have an issue talking about things, especially when I realized that talking about them not only helped me, but actually more so, I discovered first before that me talking about things was actually helping other people, in the battles that they're facing, and that's where the big mission really came from. Because I mean, I did go through a lot of pain.
Sure.
I mean, I got to Brooke Army Medical Center on a Friday night, and the head nurse looked at me and said, "We're going to do this as quickly as possible, so it'll be as painless as possible." And I didn't know what he's talking about.
Right. Right.
Well, him and two or three other nurses then all pulled out razor blades and had to start shaving and tearing and ripping all the burned, charred, dirty flesh off my hands, face, and neck while I was still awake because they had to get it off me or I would have died of infection. It's called debridement. And
Mhm.
it's very terribly painful process. It took about a half hour. And so that was a really defining moment in my life that was actually the worst part of the whole thing
Right.
was that being just physically tortured to save my life.
Mm.
And I have friends who were burned far worse than I was, who had to go, full body, that kind of thing. And so I really feel for them or anyone who's been through that. But yeah, the mental state was always, I think I've always been sort of a pretty optimistic person. I
Yeah.
mean, you get hit, you take hits, life is going to do that. But it's always been like, all right, well, you take the hit, you deal with it. There is a time for that, for
Sure.
sitting back, dealing with things, not just avoiding it, but then you have to know when it's time to start moving forward again.
Mm.
And I've always just had that mindset of, all right, well, I got nailed here. Well, all right, let's figure this out. And okay, where are we going next?
Right.
Like, what's the
Right.
next move?
Right.
I never didn't think there wasn't a next move or this is it. My life is over. I mean, I was 21, 22 when this happened.
Hmm.
I got out of the military at 23. My
Right.
life wasn't over. It was just starting.
Right, right. And you're definitely proving that, like it's just starting. And I think that's so important to be able to recognize that you must go on. It actually reminds me of a story. I remember, I mean, and mine certainly no comparison to what you experienced in terms of severity. But I remember once I was driving on this highway. It was a winter morning. It was early winter morning, and I hit a patch of ice underneath the snow, and
Mm.
my car literally spun out of control. And when it stopped, I was facing the opposite direction, so now I'm seeing on the highway headlights coming towards me.
Oh man.
And now thankfully, um there was enough distance where they were able to slow down, and I was able to kind of get my bearings and sort of and recalibrate literally. And my car engine had shut off in the moment because it spun around. My engine shut off. I'm like, oh my gosh. And
Oh
I see these
geez.
cars approaching me. So I start the engine and I slowly turn around and I continue on my journey. And I remember in that moment, because I was only halfway to where I was going, so the journey had to continue. But the whole idea is, and still to the point that you're making now, is that you've got to continue to move forward. And yeah, it happened. It was traumatic in that moment. It was scary.
For
My heart
sure.
stopped for a moment, but I had to keep going. And I'm sorry hearing a little bit about that in your story.
Yeah, and the thing with that, because that's a totally valid thing. That's a very scary experience. I've never had that one. But the thing to realize too is that everybody handles trauma differently.
Yes.
There's not a wrong way to react, to respond to it. Because I mean, some people they cower and shake in a corner. Other people they avoid things. Other people tend to be okay, but they have small issues. Uh, Everyone handles it differently. We're just
Yes.
all wired a little bit different. And for
Yes.
anyone listening, there's no wrong way to respond. You just have to recognize it for what it is, deal with whatever you have to deal with, and then when it's time, and you can trust yourself, I would say, to know when it's time to move forward
Hmm.
and start taking those steps. Start moving forward again
Yeah.
because some people say, well, it only took so and so this long, or it shouldn't be longer than this or that.
Right.
Well, it's hard to say based on what the experience was and who's experiencing it. You can have two people go through the exact same
Sure.
trauma, and
Yes.
one person bounces back up, rebounds, moves on like the other person stays down for years.
That's right.
And
That's
there's
right.
no way to know. I mean, sometimes it's the person who gets stuck the longest sometimes is the person you look at and you go, "Man, that's like the star athlete, the quarterback. That person's invincible."
Agree.
You know,
Yeah.
in a gunfight, that person would just own the situation. And sometimes that's the person who breaks. And it's the person you least expect who just handles it.
Sure.
And so you can't ever really tell, until you've been in something, how you would respond in a certain situation. And I think that's an important life lesson
I agree.
across the board, uh,
Yes.
just with the way we judge people.
Yes.
Oh, I would have done this or that. It's like, well, you really don't know. I mean, if you've ever been shot at, by machine guns, AK-47, and you go, oh, I would do this or that. It's like, well, we'll see,
Yep.
because
Yep.
that's where your training kicks in, and your natural survival mind wants to say, hey, get down, but you're trained to respond to react to contact by returning fire first before getting down. They
Right.
have to they
Right.
have to sort of train over your natural instinct to get down,
Gotcha.
because what people don't know that we get in a gunfight in the American military, your first line of action, your first course of action is not to duck, it's to return fire and get the enemy's head down, then get down and maneuver on the enemy. But
Oh man. Yeah.
so there's all these things in life that we've been trained or we've absorbed as
Yes.
lessons, and
Yes.
sometimes those are very good. Other times they were good for a time, but now we need to have a
Yep.
new program moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, and to your point, it's what's very valid, right? How we respond, it's going to be different, and I sort of equate it to sort of life, sort of being on a journey, right? So I'm on my path, and something will happen to me on my path. it'll be different from yours, right? Or maybe it's the
Hmm.
same, right? Maybe it's the same, but what I do and how I cope and how I respond, it might be totally different. I oftentimes, say to people, find like like almost like a healthy preoccupation. As long as like do whatever you need to do to get through that. As long as it's healthy, you're not
Yeah.
hurting yourself or others, but and maybe you're taking up a hobby or whatever. But when you're going through something difficult, you need to be able to know that whatever coping mechanism, whatever survival technique, whatever training that you need for you is going to be effective for you. And regardless of other people are using, there might be similarities we pull, right? There might be things
Oh
that
yeah.
are relevant, but overall, what you do and what I do is not going to be the exact same, and nor is our recovery period either.
Well, sometimes you'll go through 99 different pieces of advice that just absolutely suck. It's well intentioned, but
Yes,
the advice sucks.
that's right.
But then the 100th one, you'll land on a piece of advice where something just clicks.
Yeah.
And you couldn't have gotten to that one that just clicked without low crawling through the mud and the dirt of the
Mm,
99 that didn't work.
yes.
And
Yes.
so it's like if you're talking to a therapist, so well, therapy doesn't work. I didn't like my therapist. Well, go to 3 or 4 of them. Like, find one that really
Finally,
connects with you.
that's
Don't
right.
just quit on the first one because you didn't connect with them. It was, they're probably good people. They just weren't a good fit for you, and that's
Yep.
okay.
Yep. Yep.
But it's all about adapting.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, and I think too that very much ties into your point about sharing our stories to help us heal, because look, we can turn to people in our circle or even outside, professional, whatever. We have to be comfortable with being able to talk about the wounds and the hurts and the disappointments, the misfortunes, whatever we want to call them, because it's through that process of doing so are we able to find solutions. And I think a lot of times that has to be the starting point. So if I keep it to myself, you know, I'm not giving others an opportunity to be, okay, here's how we can do it, or here's what's next, or here's a starting point. So,
Yeah, find out what means or mode of expression works for you. Me, I accidentally shared my story and discovered public speaking, which I've been doing for almost 17 years now as a
love
professional
it.
speaker.
Love it.
Other people write. They write books. I've done that too. They write poetry. They write songs. They're musicians now. They're songwriters now.
Yep.
My wife, she overcame a lot of trauma from her past. She paints now.
I love
Like,
it.
and so there's something weirdly powerful about different art forms as a means of expression for moving
Yes.
forward beyond the
Yeah.
things or the traumas we've been through in
Yep.
life. There's something about art, but I always tell people, look for whatever kind of expression best fits you. Maybe you're not a talker. I am. Maybe you're not. But like, my wife, for example, Jamie,
Hmm.
she never tried to paint. She never had an interest in painting. Now
Mm.
she has, like, I think almost 100 in the
Wow.
past. I mean, I'm talking the past like 6 to 8 months.
Yep. Yep.
She
Wow.
just got hooked on it. She was expressing herself, and they're amazing. And so she discovered that means and that passion, that thing of expression and healing through the bad things that she's gone through and she's healed from. So always keep your
Amazing.
mind open to things.
Amazing.
You don't know the hidden parts of you that where you may have a gift or some sort of um, inner calling or desire that you don't know is there. Always
Yes.
be open to it. We don't know enough. I don't know who said it, but it was something like, we don't know enough to know we don't know, or sorry, wait, to think we don't know.
Right, right, right. And it's also, even when you from the standpoint of getting unstuck, for example, right? Like trauma is one of these things that it can stop you dead in your tracks, and you don't move forward,
Oh
and you
yeah.
feel like you can't move forward, or you feel like there's no way past what you're dealing with. And so it's so important that we don't allow it to keep us frozen and not moving.
Yeah. And one of the ways to do that effectively is, like, don't allow yourself to be alone too much. One of my
Mm,
things is that I I actually enjoy being alone, like, to my own fault. So I really like to force myself to be out there. I'm more of an extrovert, but I love being alone. I don't mind, but I know it's not good for me. So I'm only stuck with my own thoughts, and so
yeah.
I need interaction with other people. But think about, in the military we have a chain of command. Think about in your life, who's your personal chain of command? Like,
Hmm.
who are you kind of looking up to? who's kind of coaching you or guiding you along in some way or helping you move forward. And then think, who's beside you? Is there anybody who's going through a similar thing or something that you can just sort of hang out with? They're sort of on your level and you're just sort of moving forward together, even if it's just a parallel journey. And then also think, like, looking back, reaching out a hand behind you, to somebody who maybe isn't as far along in some sort of journey or some sort of healing or whatever it is, and think to yourself, who am I helping guide their journey? You're helping them up the way someone's helping me up. So it's kind of like that chain of command. You got the leader, you got your coworker, and then you got the one you're leading. It's a lot harder to quit on yourself when somebody else is looking up to you.
Yeah.
But also when you have the accountability and the guidance of a good person who can help you move forward, and you're doing it in community with other people who are on their own path. It's a trifecta that really, really works if we create our own personal chain of command.
Yes.
But a lot of people don't.
Right.
I was even in the military. I know this stuff.
Right.
And I got out and I didn't do it for years. Like,
Right.
I knew it, I just didn't do it. Nobody
Right.
trained me to like take the things I knew in the military and apply them to my personal life.
Right.
But it's easy. It's simple to do.
Well,
Not
it
easy,
makes,
but
as
it's
you
simple.
say, it makes total sense, right? Like you get it. Like,
Yeah.
that makes total sense. The other part I want to touch on is, it's so easy to think that you're going through a situation or a circumstance that no one on the planet has any idea what you're experiencing, right? No one has any concept. And then it's almost like, the heavens open up when you realize that someone else gets it, right? Or
Oh, yeah.
not even just gets it, but they got it and has a plan to get you through what you're going through at that exact moment. So having that sense of community is so important for many, many reasons.
Yeah. The thing about it, it's like, everyone's on a battlefield.
Mhm.
And the thing about being on your own battlefield is you have blind spots. There are certain parts of that field you can't see because you might be walking up a mountainside and there's a ridge line. You can't see what's on the other side. But then you have, in my case, in Afghanistan, we had warplanes and helicopters. We had close air support, CAS, close air support.
Mhm.
And these combat aircraft, they could see our battlefield from a different vantage point than us. Now, they didn't know what it was like to be in our boots. Like, they weren't running up and down mountains fighting terrorists every day.
Right.
They were flying above it. They didn't know what it was like, but they also weren't affected by the lack of perspective or the blind spots we had because we were in the position we were. They had a different perspective on our battlefield. They could see things we couldn't. They could say, hey, don't go over that ridge line, 500,000 meters in front of you or whatever, because, there's 50 or 80 enemy gathering there or
Right.
something that we wouldn't see it until we, stumble up on it. So other people can see your battlefield. And even if they don't know what you've been through, that's not always a credibility killer. Sometimes it's a credibility builder because, again, they're not blinded and affected in an inhibiting way by your situation the way maybe you are. So the
Right.
people you actually think can't relate to you, they don't need to relate to you. They can see things that you can't because,
Mhm.
you're in the fog of war when you're dealing with something. You can only see sometimes going through a really bad situation. You're maybe seeing 5 or 10 feet in front of you, metaphorically speaking. It's so
Right.
foggy. It's gray. You're so focused on survival and getting through your mind can only focus on so many things.
Gotcha.
And so that's why one reason why that happens. And that's why having a personal chain of command is really important. On top of the fact it gives you a sense of meaning, and a lot of
Mm.
times you discover your next mission in life through those
Good
people.
point. Good point. Good point. Good point. Um, when did you recognize the value in sharing your story?
I recognized the value in sharing my story on March 15th of 2007.
I love
It
it.
was,
Specific.
yep, I know the exact day. I returned home to the medical center, medevaced out of Afghanistan on July 27th of '06. I met a Vietnam veteran who was my mentor on January 25th of '07, just 5 months later. And he brought me to one of his events, flew me out, said, hey, I'll pay your way. I said, free is good. I grew up poor. And so I showed up. I didn't know he was going to put me on stage, and he put me on. I was still in burn bandages. My face was still,
Oh, wow.
red from the burns. He put me up on stage, and I didn't know, in front of 3,000 people. And I had like 2 minutes, and he said, hey, come on up here and tell him about yourself. So I got up, burned bandages and everything, and I said something like, "Hey, I'm Brian. I got blown up. I guess I'm still here for a reason. Go for it." I don't know. It was probably the worst motivational speech ever. But when I stepped off stage, my life changed. And
Gotcha.
here's what happened. A young lady about my age in her mid 20s at that time came up to me and said, "Hey Brian, I as a kid I was raped and molested and abused, and then in my
Mm,
teen years it continued." She said, "My boyfriend was abusive. He broke up with me a few weeks ago, and I tried to kill myself 2 weeks ago, but I failed suicide." And I had no idea why she's telling me this.
mm.
And she didn't introduce herself. She just came up
Right,
and laid this on me.
right, right, right.
And so I was just like, my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, what do you say to somebody like that?
Yep.
But then she said this, though. She said, "You know what, though? If you can survive all of that from Afghanistan," she said, "I think I can get through this." And that
Wow.
lit a fuse in me. Something came out of me in that moment I didn't know was inside me. And I didn't know for years what it was. But I knew I had to find more people like her. And through speaking, I realized I can find those people and help them. And it wasn't so much that I have a crazy story of survival. It was like you said. I mean, somebody sees another person making it, they're
Yep.
not alone.
Right.
And not only that, for years I didn't know how to describe what that was that came out of me. People would ask, like, what's the one thing, like as if it was one thing for getting past a major obstacle in life. But but what happened was probably 4 or 5 years into speaking,
Hmm.
I read a book by Dr. Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a
Mm.
Holocaust survivor, a
Yep.
psychiatrist, brilliant human, one of the
Hmm.
best books ever written.
Focus on the
And you can,
why.
yeah. And he
Yeah.
said in that book, he said in one sentence what I didn't know how to say in 1,000 words. And here's what he said. Here's what happened in that moment when I met this lady. And she
Hmm.
told me this. He said, "In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning." I'll
Yeah.
say that again. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. I found a sense of meaning in my suffering
Yes.
when I found out she's not going to go home and kill herself today.
Mhm.
And I thought, there are probably, oh, not probably, there are more people out there like that.
Sure.
And not only did it feel good to help her, which I didn't mean to, I mean, she helped me equally. And we didn't know we were, but it made me realize that it gave me a sort of a sense of mission for moving forward. Go find more people, share your story, not to talk about yourself, but to use that as a platform to find people and talk about the lessons that I learned through my bad experience
Yes.
that I can help people apply to their lives to win the battle they're facing. Because in
Mhm.
my speeches, I don't just talk about myself. I only talk about my story about 10% of my speech. The
Mm.
rest is like how it applies to your life and
Yes.
what you're going through, because
Yeah.
that's all you care about.
Yeah.
And that's all I get. Like, we're trying to get ahead. So we're trying to get
Right.
somewhere in life. And so that's how you really serve people, is you make it relevant.
Well, and I like the idea of focusing on the a positive solution forward. There's sometimes a hazard in our stories if we're sharing, if we're emphasizing on the wrong parts, right? Like we could tell a story and I could share my story and I could tell you about all the misery and all the pain I went through, and you could walk away with nothing except misery and pain, or telling a story that sure, this was the misery and pain I went through, but you know what? Here's how I got through it. Here are the steps I had taken, and here's who my support system was, and here's the lessons I learned from it, and here's why it could be relevant to you. Like that's a powerful story. So we, so
Absolutely.
so I think it's really integral that when we're sharing our stories that we're emphasizing the right parts of it.
Yeah, totally. And I was very fortunate that this guy, Dave Reaver is his name. He's one of my best friends, and
Hmm.
he was my mentor not just in speaking, but he became a kind of a mentor in life
Hmm.
because he was a Vietnam veteran who was injured. So he knew the path I was on, the
Right.
issues I was dealing with, and I was very fortunate to have that person come into my life when they did. If if we had not had our paths collide all on their own, it would have been up to me to go find that person for, who can help me get to where I'm trying to go next in life. And I didn't really have any aspiration or goal yet at that point in life. I knew I was getting out of the military,
Sure.
um, but I didn't have like an actual clear path. And I happened to meet him, 8 or 9 months before getting out. but it still would have been on me if I hadn't, to make the path, make the plan. And when you make a plan, it doesn't always work. We have a saying in the military, even the best plan goes out the window when the bullets start flying,
Yeah.
because suddenly everything changes.
Yeah.
You're surviving now. Like, the hell with the plan. Like, we got to survive. Then we'll figure out another route to the destination we're trying to get to. But isn't that life though? That's how life happens. Everything's great. And you're like, all right, the plan's set. Let's go. It's all gonna be. And it's just like, wham, you got a hurricane comes through.
Yep.
Whenever the car breaks down, it's an expensive repair. Then the hot water heater goes down, or your furnace, or your AC, and then the kid gets sick and the dog dies. And I mean, when it rains, it pours sometimes, and it's like you just can't catch a break sometimes.
Yes.
But that's where other people come in. It's so important to have people in your life.
Yeah. No, you're right. Like, you can plan things out, but bullets fly, like you said. The plan means nothing if you can't survive and you get into survival mode, right? So
yeah, well, and that's all you're focused on is survival with something like that. And so naturally you start to forget about the mission or the plan or whatever. And you just got to make sure you can stay tethered to that and come back to it once you deal with, all the bullets flying at you per se.
This is it. Part of the healing process or overcoming trauma is resiliency, like a strong sense of resiliency to get you over that hump. Resiliency is that the ability to bounce back from situations, right? Or bounce, not let them hold you down, but bounce up and do what you got to do to move forward. I would I would think that the more times you go through situations, or the more experiences that you have, the stronger your sense of resilience. And so, in some ways, we need to go through these difficult times to become stronger individuals. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, because life is not easy. Life is very difficult by nature.
Yeah.
And I had a very rough, upbringing, especially with my parents' divorce when I was 12.
Mhm.
And in a lot of ways that emotionally numbed me for a long time.
Yeah.
I actually attribute my ability to handle Afghanistan and my injury mentally to my childhood, because it made me so able to compartmentalize and shut off my emotions, that it served me for a time. Now, the trick, like with post-traumatic stress, you can flick it like a light switch and enable it. But turning that thing off is not a flick of a switch. And so you have to make sure that you're finding ways, again, to deal with things so that you can be healthy. Because if you just operate according to that compartmentalization, that's good for survival.
Yes.
But when you're out of the war zone now and you're with your wife and kids, and they need a dad who's loving and present and empathetic and caring, you have to be able to feel again if you want to be a great person to the people around you. And there were a number of years I was very turned off. It's just it's what I had to do, and it wasn't always easy. And sometimes you don't see it happening, but other people do. And I'm going to tell you this, man, it feels good to be able to feel again. I mean, I didn't cry for years, and man, sometimes I'll hear a song on the radio. I'll be going down the road by myself driving, and something will hit me. It's like, man, what the hell am I crying for? Like, why am I getting emotional?
Right.
And there's something about it, but it's okay. It's like, it's a human thing. It's an expression of something inside you purging out of you. Sometimes we purge through vomiting. Sometimes we purge through yelling or laughing or crying. It's like, it's an expression of something getting out of you. And it's always good to be able to get things out of you. Especially if it has something to do, say, with a healing effect from an experience. And sometimes if I hear a song on the radio or something, sometimes I don't know if it's directly tied to a rough experience. It's just like, wow, I love the way they said, like they took 100 words and this person sing and said it in like one killer sentence that I couldn't think to say it that way.
Gotcha.
Like, wow, I'm just so impressed by that, the artistry of it.
Yep. You reference 3 habits of resilient people. And if you could talk about that, share what those are.
Yeah. And like you said, we go through things in life and we learn resilience is to me, resilience is your ability to adapt. And the harder things you go through that don't completely wreck you and destroy you, they do tend to build on each other and make you a stronger person. It's not always obviously easy. It's almost never easy, but each hard thing you go through does build you. It gives you thicker skin. And we've alluded to those three things already.
Mhm.
The first thing I realized was that sense of meaning. After
Yes.
coming home from Afghanistan, I met that lady by chance after I got off stage, and I had a very strong sense of meaning. Think about
Mhm.
your life. Like, what can you like? What have you learned through whatever it is you're going through or have been through? And who's dealing with that same issue? They might have gone through the same thing, or
Yep.
they may have gone through something else, but that outcome, that issue they're dealing with is the same issue as a result of a different trauma or a different challenge
Yep.
they went through that was not the same as yours. I've met, it's like that. It's like that lady I talked about. She was abused growing up. I was not, but we both dealt with post traumatic stress for a time and to a certain degree, and so we could relate on that.
Yes.
The second thing was that chain of command. It was that establish a chain of command in your life. Maybe it's in your marriage, maybe it's
Mhm.
mentally for yourself, maybe it's in your fitness, maybe it's in your career. You might have a few different chains of command, and maybe they overlap, maybe they don't, but have somebody you're following. Have someone who is credible to lead you, who understands where you're at, where you're trying to go. And again, have those people that a community you're doing life with, and have other people you're always try to be leading somebody.
Mm. Yeah.
Speaking into somebody's life.
Gotcha.
Because when we talk about suicide, which is a huge issue, especially in the military,
Sure.
where I come from, people who still have a mission, something left to live for, and other people looking up to them,
Mhm.
it's really hard to say that person's going to kill themselves
Right.
because they still have something left to do that they believe. And also, they're usually thinking, well, what about these people I'm guiding? They're looking up to me, like they're depending on me.
Yep.
If I do this, what's that going to mean for them? And the thing is, it's a lot easier to quit on yourself than other people sometimes. And
Mm.
so the fact that you have some sort of chain of command community in your life can really pull you through when you get so tired of pushing because it's exhausting.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, yeah, and finding that next mission as you're going through life and helping people, doing community with people, look for
Mhm.
problems. I mean,
Mm.
every business that makes money solves problems
Yes.
because that's what we give our attention to. We have problems, we want them solved, and so think about like the problems you can solve with the experiences you've been through. Look back at yourself. Look at the problems you've overcome.
Yep.
Maybe one or two or maybe five. What were like the major ones you know how to overcome? Go find people who are dealing with that. Find groups. Where do they hang out of these particular kinds of people? And just start sharing with them. Start trying to be of value to them because what's going to happen is you're going to have a more fulfilling life. You're going to be helping other people
Yes.
win. And sometimes, I mean, in my case, it turned into a full fledged career that I didn't know even existed. And I have a very fulfilling life. I've been married almost 19 years, extremely happily. Been doing this almost 17. I absolutely love what I get to do
Right.
for a living
Yep.
speaking.
Yep.
But I found it because I was just trying to help. I didn't know anyone did
Oh,
it.
that problem. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. No, it's great. Again, that last point on solving that problem, finding that solution, is so important because that's that's how you're giving back in profound ways to people who absolutely need to hear your message. And so I love that very, very much. Curious. I would imagine the end of this experience. You've scars or the remnants of what took place. What sticks with you the most when you sort of think about it all?
What's the what?
What sticks with you the most stays with you while the
I,
experience.
I would say the hardest thing produced the best thing. And when you're going through something hard, that sounds nice and flowery, but it's not what you want to hear.
Mm.
But keep your eyes open. The You're on a battlefield. Everyone's on a battlefield. Once you understand how a battlefield works, you'll understand how life works.
Gotcha.
And sometimes it's time to take action. Other times it's time to do what we call letting the battlefield develop. If you're in some sort of conflict, a gunfight, and it's maybe across, a quarter mile or, a couple hundred yards, this literal battlefield, there are times to shoot back, to maneuver. Other times you need to, if you're maybe up in an overwatch position,
Mhm.
there are times when you need to just stop and watch for a minute.
Yeah.
Like everything in you wants to act. But when you stop temporarily, it's called letting the battlefield develop. You're just observing, okay, here's what's happening. Oh, these people, this enemy moved over here and that one moved. Oh, they're going to try to flank us on both sides. All right, we need to get people on the flanks. We're not just diving in the middle. We need to get people on left and right, for example. But if you're just act, and you're not stopping, watching it develop, okay, here's what's happening. It's a balance between the two. But that's what you have to do with your life too.
Yes. Yeah, no, I guess it makes sense. I mean, sometimes we get into, that flight or fight mode when really we need to sort of take that moment and pause and understand the situation and survey to make the right choices. And so I hear that loud and clear in that example. Brian,
well, it's also difficult to get advice from other people if you're just so focused on taking your action.
Yeah.
Like you should take action,
sure,
but take calculated action and know when to stop and listen. So you can take better action.
That's it. No, great point to close on. Brian, this has been really awesome. I thank you for sharing the man what you have and sharing your story particularly. I mean, it's such power in doing so. For listeners who wanted to connect with you, learn more about you, where can we send them?
Go to useyourstory.com. And here's why. Over the past 17 years or so I've been doing this, I've had so many people ask me, Brian, how do I do what you do? I want to share my story. Because nobody really teaches this, not in school or college. They don't teach you how to be a professional speaker. Well, I have a program at useyourstory.com, and it's a free resource. It's called the Share Your Story Roadmap.
Okay.
All right. It's a 1-page PDF. It has a short video with it, and I'll show you exactly how to share your story from a place of value and make your first $500 speaking. This is free. If I was starting over, how do I get started the right way? I have no idea, and I'm trying to be financially productive with it and make money doing it. This is exactly what I do. And the reason it's important to make money is because you cannot share or spread your message, only to an extent, if you can't be financially productive. It's not about the money, but the money's the grease on the machine that makes the whole thing work. And if you can't be productive financially with it, it doesn't go anywhere. It seizes up. It doesn't work, and you don't help as many people as you could. So that's why I put that on there. You can make your first $500 speaking. I show you how for free. Everything's easy to do when you know how to do it. It's when you don't know what you're doing that it's difficult. So if you want to go to useyourstory.com, feel free to do that. If you want to book me to speak, go to blownupguy.com, because I got blown up and I'm a guy, and that's my website, blownupguy.com.
Awesome. That's awesome. Listen, Brian, this has been great. I really appreciate sharing with you today. Congratulations and all the best, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Back we are here on the podcast. During our conversation with Brian, he emphasized the power of sharing experiences to foster healing. He discovered that talking about this trauma not only helped him, but also encouraged others facing their own battles. And that's a message that we spoke on this podcast in the past. Brian's message is clear. By finding meaning in our struggles and supporting one another, we can move forward and build lives filled with purpose and audacity. I encourage you to reach out to Brian directly. His contact details are available in the show notes below, where you can learn more about his work and connect with him personally. Brian is offering a free book on resilience and recovery to our listeners. And again, the show notes will have those particular details. Thank you for tuning in to the Audacious Living Podcast. As we close out this episode, I remind you that if you've enjoyed what you've heard, please like, follow, subscribe, or share. If you haven't already done so, your support helps us grow and continue bringing you inspiring content. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.